Hi guys, Sean here from DigiDirect. Now today we've got an exciting video. We're going to be taking a hands-on first look at the new Canon 6D Mark II. Now this has just been announced. The original 6D came out in 2012 and it's still been a very popular camera up to this day. So people have been waiting a long time for this new camera. There's a lot of excitement out there about this. We were lucky enough to get our hands on with the camera for a day to shoot with it. And by we, I mean myself, as well as we brought along Jared Hyde, who is a prominent Melbourne-based landscape photographer. So the two of us went out for the day and shot with the camera. I'm going to be running through the specs and so on of the camera like I normally do, and then at the end we'll have Jared discuss some of his first impressions of the camera, just shooting with it from his perspective as a landscape photographer. But let's start with a look at the body of the 6D Mark II. First thing we can see here is that the body is very similar to the original 6D, which means it's a bit smaller and lighter than the 5D Mark IV is. It's a fully weather-sealed body, which was actually quite convenient because the day that we went out shooting was a really wet, wintry, cold day out here. We got a lot of rainwater on the camera, but it held up just fine, which is great. We've got a new sensor in this camera, which I'll touch on shortly, as well as a new Digic 7 processor inside. This is an upgrade from the Digic 5 Plus processor that was on the original 6D. One big physical update though here, probably the biggest in terms of its body design, is we get a fully articulating screen on the 6D Mark II here. This is fairly significant. The 5D Mark IV doesn't have that. The Nikon full-frame DSLRs don't have that. It is also a touch screen, so we've got touch functionality on here. We can jump around the menus using the touch screen. We have a single SD card slot on the side here. That's the same as we see on the original 6D. One point of comparison to the 5D Mark IV, which has an SD card and a CF card slot. We also have Wi-Fi and NFC, as well as notably Bluetooth on the 6D Mark II. So that's going to make it easier to transfer photos and share your photos around. Another really nice improvement is the battery life. So the 6D Mark II uses the Canon LP E6N batteries that we've seen for quite a while now in a lot of the different Canon models, but it is rated for 1,200 shots, which is quite a high number of shots. That's better than the 5D Mark IV, which is rated at 900 shots. Now, battery life is not a super flashy feature, but it is really important, and it just gives you a lot more flexibility and versatility if the camera can last a long time. We were shooting for basically a full day with this camera, and I think we got down to about 2/3 battery life, so not even halfway. So really good battery life on the 6D Mark II. I was happy about that. We also have a mic port, but not a headphone jack, and an HDMI and a USB port on the side here. So under the hood, we have quite a few updates here as well. Starting off with the sensor, we've got a brand new 26.2 megapixel sensor in the 6D Mark II. That's an upgrade over the 20 megapixel sensor that's in the original 6D. Now that's a fairly nice resolution increase. That's going to allow you to print out some nice quality, very large prints, crop in a decent amount to your photos. The 5D Mark IV has a 30 megapixel sensor, so that's fairly close in the 6D Mark II here. Now, one of the major headline features on this camera that has to do with the sensor is improved low light performance. Now, Canon is claiming that the 6D Mark II has better low light performance than the 5D Mark IV. That's a pretty significant statement. Now, we were out with the camera during the day, so we didn't get to shoot any nighttime shots and test that out super hard. However, we did get to shoot some macro shots where we were able to bump the ISO up to the max native ISO of 40,000 ISO. Now, look at these shots. That's really impressive. The amount of noise here again, being at 40,000 ISO is really a nice sign. I'd like to see more certainly and shoot some nighttime stuff and be able to bring you some more information on that. But certainly as a first look, seeing these photos at 40,000 ISO with the amount of noise that they have there, that's really quite impressive. That's going to be useful for a lot of different types of photographers, astro stuff, wedding music photographers, and dark event venues and so on. All of these kind of people are going to really benefit from good low light performance, so that's definitely a really nice feature to have in this camera. Adding to that is that the camera can now autofocus in low light up to -3 stops of light. So that's a feature that was carried over from the 1DX Mark II, and that's just going to add to the low light performance because you can get your autofocus working well even if you're shooting in lower light conditions. Speaking of autofocus, we've also seen an improvement here. So the original 6D, one of the main differences it always had with the 5D Mark III was that the 5D Mark III had a better autofocusing system than the 6D, the original one did. That dynamic is still going to be there. The 5D Mark IV is still going to have a more comprehensive autofocus system than the 6D Mark II, but the 6D Mark II goes from 11 autofocus points, which it had on the original 6D, to 45 cross-type autofocus points now. So quite a big upgrade In autofocus points, it's going to mean it's going to be a lot faster to autofocus. The 5D Mark IV has 61 autofocus points, so not a huge difference there. It has some other autofocus features that are not on the 6D Mark II, but definitely a big improvement in autofocus capability on the 6D Mark II. They've also increased the burst shooting, so the 6D Mark II can now shoot 6.5 frames per second as opposed to 4.5 on the original 6D. So tying in with that, you're going to be able to shoot better autofocus of moving subject and be able to shoot bursts to capture that better. It also inherits the dual pixel AF system that Canon has been putting into a lot of its cameras these days. That's a live view autofocus system that does really well at tracking in live view. So if you're shooting with the screen photos, or if you're shooting video, which is obviously shot in live view as well. Now, leading on to video there, this is one area that I think some people are going to have some issues with the 6D Mark II. So the camera can shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second, so you can get slow-mo in full HD. And that dual pixel autofocus system does work quite well for video. You can see here, it's following Jared's face here really quite well as he walks towards and back from the camera. This is at f1.8 with the 85mm, by the way, so pretty good job here. But the camera does not shoot 4K video. So you cannot shoot 4K video on the 6D Mark II. Also, the camera has a mic input, so you can put an external mic on there, but as I mentioned earlier, no headphone jack, so you can't monitor that audio. I think Canon here is pretty clearly saying that the 6D Mark II is intended primarily for photographers, not for serious videography. And that's fair enough. The 6D Mark I was similarly kind of geared more towards photography than videography. However, I do think that Canon's going to catch some flack here. A lot of people these days are expecting 4K video to be a feature on any new release, and the 6D Mark II is not going to have that. So I think they're going to catch a little bit of flack there for that. It does have a 4K time-lapse mode, which allows you to shoot a series of still photos, which will put together into a 4K resolution time-lapse. This is an improvement over the original 6D, which had no time-lapse features at all. Okay, so that's the specs of the 6D Mark II. Now let's check in with Jared Hyde, and he's going to give some of his first impressions from spending the day shooting with the camera.
My name's Jared Hyde, and I'm a Melbourne-based landscape photographer. Weather today was a typical winter Melbourne day. We've been up in the mountains, so we've had constant drizzle. Walking around all day shooting with the 6D Mark II, and to not have to worry about it in those conditions was great. There was water all over the camera and the lens, so weather sealing was perfect. The 6D Mark II now has a 3-inch articulating LCD screen, which is definitely going to come in handy for landscape photography. With the tripod set up quite low, you can't always access the rear of the screen, so to be able to tilt that screen up and still be able to see your composition will really come in handy, especially for things like night photography, when you have your camera maybe pointed towards the sky and you can't quite see. Honestly, I was surprised with the weight of the 6D Mark II. It was super light compared to my 5D IV. Barely noticed it walking around with it all day and shooting, paired up with a 16 to 35 f4. Yeah, just super lightweight. Honestly, I think people are really going to love the form factor of this new camera. So first impressions of low light performance of the 6D Mark II was really good. We pushed it right to the max, 40,000 ISO, and yeah, at a glance, yeah, the images looked really clean off the back of the camera, so really looking forward to having a closer look, but so far I'm impressed. Overall first impressions of the 6D Mark II were very positive. I think there's a lot of nice new features there that people are going to be impressed with. It's a solid camera. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it a bit more in the future to really put it through its paces, but from what I've seen so far, it's quite an impressive camera.
We don't have exact pricing yet, but I'm sure we'll hear a bit more on that soon. The camera is slated for a late July release, so hopefully in about a month or so, we'll start seeing them in stores. You can pre-order the 6D Mark II on our website at www.digidirect.com.au or in one of our stores. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia. Thanks guys, take care.